Dear audience, welcome to the show POWERchat. In today's episode, we'll be discussing on Nepal-Finland relations and Finland government's development support to Nepal. Joining us today, His Excellency Jorma Suvanto, Finnish Ambassador to Nepal. Please allow me to welcome him. Welcome to the show, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much, and I'm very privileged to be here in the morning.
How have you been?
I have been very well, thank you. Everything is fine.
Well, Your Excellency, it's already 2 years that you have joined Nepal as the Ambassador of Finland. How do you assess the development process and diversity of Nepal? What is your impression about Nepal's diversity?
First of all, I would like to mention that Nepal still remains one of the least developed countries in the world, and there's quite a lot of challenges for Nepal to graduate from the least developed country to a developing country by 2022. And according to my observations during the 2 years that I have been now enjoying to be here in Nepal, maybe some of the issues I would like to take up when it comes to the development process. And one of the issues what I have noticed is the low productivity of agriculture. That is one of the issues since we know that agriculture contributes almost 1/3 of the GDP in Nepal. So this is one of the issues on sectors Nepal should pay more attention to. Then of course the poor infrastructure. I'm talking about the road network, I'm talking about power supply and so on. That should be also tackled and improved. And this is also related to the investments, foreign investments into the country. You definitely must have adequate infrastructure in place before you can attract investments in Nepal. When we talk about the investments, I have also noticed that the legislation and regulations related to conductive investment environment is still pending to a certain extent. I know that the government is doing quite a lot in this respect, but in order to attract foreign investments, I think the legislation and the related regulations should be in place. There is one issue in that respect. What I have also noticed is that quite widespread corruption in Nepal is something that the Nepal government should tackle more effectively, because this is one of the issues that I have been discussing with the investors also, and they have mentioned this corruption many times, that this is something that definitely has a negative impact when it comes to the foreign investments in Nepal.
Well, Your Excellency, you touched upon very important issues from low productivity to corruption here in Nepal. How do you observe the state of relation between two countries, Finland and Nepal?
Well, Finland and Nepal, we have enjoyed excellent relations since 1974, 43 years back, when we established our diplomatic relations. And the relations has been very cordial, and of course the relations have been based on development cooperation, which started early 80s. And of course it has been extended also in the fields of trade, in the field of culture exchange and so on. So I think at this point, and in a nutshell, our relations between our two countries, they are very good, they are expanding, cordial, and so on.
Could you also tell us the most outstanding progresses that have taken place in Nepal due to result of the relation between the people of two countries since Nepal and Finland established formal diplomatic ties?
Yes, the connection between our two people has been developed mainly through our development cooperation. I think this is number one. And I would like to mention also the cooperation between the universities and between the research centers, research organizations, which have laid foundation for the long-term relationship between Finland and Nepal. There is another issue, maybe I would like to take it up also. In Finland we have quite a big Nepalese community. We have more than 3,000 Nepalese in Finland, mainly students and Nepalese working in the restaurant sector in Finland. I can mention that in Helsinki metropolitan area where I come from, we have more than 50 Nepalese restaurants. And that is an indication, of course, that Finland and Finnish people like Nepalese food very much. So I think this is something that has developed during the 43 years we have had our relationship between our two countries.
You said that Nepal and Finland maintain cordial relation for a long time. Could you tell us how can this untroubled and cordial relations be intensified in the areas of development?
I think that's a good question, and that's something that we are also thinking on daily basis, how to improve and even intensify and activate our relations. And I would like to take up two aspects, for instance, which I already mentioned, the trade and commercial ties. Those should be intensified between our two countries. I think that's one of the priorities also in our embassy, to try to do everything that trade, not only from Finland to Nepal, but also from Nepal to Finland, could be intensified, and we are taking measures to improve that situation. I think that's number one. Then another thing is, what I feel very important is that we could also intensify and activate the exchange of high-level visits between our two countries, from Nepal to Finland and vice versa, in a high political level, because I think that would definitely contribute to already very good relations between our two countries, and it would help also and contribute to many of the sectors that we are working together with. So I think these two things, it's something that we should maybe do more that we are doing at the moment.
What are the Finnish government's development priorities as such in Nepal?
At the moment, we have a fairly small portfolio. Our main sectors are water and sanitation. We have 2 bilateral programs in Nepal, in Far West and in Midwest in Pokhara area. The other priority sector or main sector is education. We are contributing to the school sector development program here with the other international partners. So this is another 2 main sectors. Then we are also working with the UN agencies like UNICEF, UNDP and UN Women in the field of democracy and human rights, rule of law, and especially strengthening the role and empowering the women and girls through UN Women. So these are kind of cross-cutting issues, cross-cutting programs, and we are trying to incorporate these issues also in our bilateral programs with the Nepalese government. We are also assisting UNICEF when it comes to the reconstruction after the earthquakes here in Nepal.
How do you work with the civil society organizations?
We are quite active also in the civil society organization front. We have a few Finnish civil society organizations, mainly church organizations working here, and then we are funding also more than 20 local NGOs here in Nepal. And
you mean the Nepal's NGOs?
Nepal's NGOs, yes, yes, based here in Nepal. Yes, that is true. And of course, as an embassy, we try to keep regular contacts with the civil society organizations by organizing common events and sessions for discussion and so. So we think this civil society organizations and the sector is also very important here in Nepal, and they are definitely doing very good work also in order to tackle the development processes here in Nepal.
Your Excellency, at the beginning you said that corruption is widespread here in Nepal. Before I come to Finnish government's development support's impact in Nepal, I would like to ask you that how can the issues concerning corruption or issues concerning rule of law be tackled? What is your suggestion? Ending corruption and maintaining rule of law.
I think there are 2 aspects. Of course, the government of Nepal is already doing things to tackle corruption and maintaining rule of law here in Nepal. We know that there is a CIIA, for instance, which is taking up the corruption cases and so on and so. But I think one of the most important measures, to my understanding would be kind of a civic education in the local level, in the grassroots level, to understand what it means to the development of Nepal if the corruption is rampant. And I think from that point of view, this is part of the democracy also. So from the grassroots level point of view, if we could tackle this issue to have education on the grassroots level, that would definitely help to understand what it really means to the development of Nepal if you have a rampant corruption.
Well, how do you measure the impact of your government's development support in Nepal? What are the monitoring and evaluation mechanisms that your support is best utilized so that real beneficiaries benefit from the support going in?
We are of course regularly monitoring and evaluating and reviewing our programs here in Nepal, and especially in the purpose to try to guarantee for ourselves and for our taxpayers in Finland that the work which we are doing here is sustainable, and the target groups here are right, that we are actually targeting here. And if we look at for instance, water and sanitation programs, we have been able to provide adequate water resources and sanitation for hundreds of thousands of people in the rural areas, in the very remote areas. As I mentioned, we are working, for instance, in the far west, which is very far, and it is not so easily approached and so on. So I think in that water and sanitation sector we have been very, very successful. It's kind of a flagship program for us in Nepal. When it comes to education, I think that is another area where I feel that we have been able to gain tangible results, especially when it comes to enrollment of girls in the schools, and then also the quality of education has improved a lot through teachers' education, and so those are, I think, the areas that there's a lot of demand in Nepal, and on the other hand, Finland has something to offer and provide for the Nepalese. So I think our support has been successful, and also on a sustainable basis, which is of course very important when you tackle poverty, when you are in the process of reducing or even eradicating poverty in Nepal.
You are also referring to your support within some UN agencies, especially that of human rights and rule of law.
Yes.
How do you assess the current political situation of Nepal? What are your suggestions for the effective implementation of the constitution and federalism?
That is a very interesting question, I have to say, and being a newcomer here in Nepal, I found that the political life and, let's say, the domestic politics is quite complex to understand. I have to admit that. And if we look at, for instance, the current local elections, I understood that there were almost 100 political parties who took part in the elections, and that's quite a figure, I have to say. Another thing is that I have been a bit surprised about the very short tenure of the governments here in Nepal. I have been here for 2 years, and I think it's the fourth government now. And I'm not quite sure if such a short government period would add value to the development processes in Nepal. So that is something that I have observed. When it comes to constitution, first of all, I think the promulgation of the constitution 2 years back, 2015, it was in itself, it was a huge step forward. We have to keep that definitely in mind. Of course, after that comes the implementation of the constitution, the related legislation, the related regulations, and so on. And that, of course, takes time, because there are a lot of work to be carried out in this respect. But I think I just would like to once more congratulate Nepal for this promulgation of constitution 2 years back. When it comes to federalism, that's an interesting issue, and I have to admit that I am a believer of federalism, and especially maybe it doesn't suit for each and every country in the world, but in the case of Nepal is a diversified country when you look at Nepal geographically, ethnically, and also if you look at the rich culture in Nepal, which is also quite diversified. The federalism is the right choice, and I think as is stipulated in the constitution. And I think that is something that definitely should be developed in Nepal as soon as possible. Again, I know that there is a tremendous challenge in Nepal to implement this federalism, but it's something that gives also the voice to the minorities and minority groups in Nepal, and gives more power to the local level. But there is maybe one criteria or precondition that should be fulfilled. To my extent, or to my understanding, the grassroots level and the local people should be taken on board when adopting this federalism and when preparing for the implementation of federalism. So I think that is something that should be kept in mind. Local people, grassroots level. And I think that would then bring the best possible result.
How do you assess the empowerment issues, especially that of the diverse groups? Do you think that the support coming from the international community, including that of your government, is best utilized for empowering the backward people, or say those who are not mainstreamed in Nepal's socio-political and development issues?
I believe so, and according to quite many field visits that I have been an opportunity to spend and carry out in several parts of Nepal, and when discussing with the people and especially with the women in the villages, I think they have found it very, very beneficial what we have been cooperating and in what ways we have been cooperating with the communities in the rural area. So this is my, let's say, kind of first observations when it comes to our programs, and I think also the UN organizations that we are working with are very beneficial, and they are very experienced in that respect. So I think we are in the right path in that way. Again, a lot of work remains to be done in that field as well.
Well, at the beginning you said that, Your Excellency, Nepal has a lot of potentials in the areas of resources.
Yes.
But these resources have not been utilized, resulting to low productivity. How can Nepal's natural resources be best utilized so that there are more opportunities created within nation, and it obviously leads to the path of development?
Yes. I would like to take up one sector, one aspect which I have also noticed and which is of course a common knowledge, and that is the hydropower. We know that only 1% of this potential of hydropower is in Nepal has been taken into use, which is really a modest share of what Nepal could do of tapping the natural resources, especially when it comes to hydropower. We know that there are energy hungry neighbors here in Nepal. I mean, if you go across the border, you will find India or Bangladesh who are in the dire need of energy. And in that respect, Nepal should do much more in tapping the hydropower in the country, definitely. I think that's something that, but it again, requires investments. Without investments you can't do much, and when, as I said before, attracting investments, you need a conducive investment environment or climate in Nepal. So this is kind of a circle, and each and every point of the circle should work before this kind of development, especially and in this case from the power sector and hydropower sector, could be tapped.
Are you referring to our neighbors as energy hungry neighbors, and the success of such productions or utilization of such resources depend upon their interest as well?
I think so. I definitely think so. I also think that whatever we do, for instance in the power sector, we should take a regional approach, definitely. And I'm quite sure that if and when definitely Nepal can take this hydropower into use, there is a lot to be exported just across the borders. And this is important for the fact that if you look at the trade balance in the country, that is very negative, as we know, and the export is the problem. Nepal should find means and ways of exporting more, and hydropower is something that I think that it would help a lot if that could be taken into use.
Where does Nepal need to invest based on your experience? You are staying here for last 2 years as the ambassador of Finland. Where does Nepal need to invest more in future so that development comes to the right path?
Well, I think I already mentioned some of those issues that should be tackled, definitely. And well, in a nutshell, I mean, this investment environment should be improved. Definitely, government is already taking measures to do that through legislation, reducing bureaucracy and tackling corruption. That is something that definitely should be done. To modernize agriculture is something also, because we know that there is a lot of potential in agriculture also, especially when you go to the terai areas and so on. One thing I just would like to highlight here is that we should take care of the future generations, young people, and to make sure that the new young people are able to work here in Nepal and to offer them jobs. Nepal cannot rely on migrant workers, Nepalese who are working in Gulf area, in India, in Malaysia and so on. It's of course good because the inflow of remittances is very high. We know that the remittances they constitute or contribute around 1/3 of the GDP here in Nepal. But in the long run, this does not work. There is I think obviously it is so that those countries who provide work for the Nepalese migrant workers, their economy is based on oil. And it's only the question of time when the oil is not needed as much as it needed in today's world. And when that time comes, then we must have here in Nepal an opportunity to provide jobs and work opportunities for the young people. So we should somehow look also into the future, not just very close, but to have maybe a longer perspective when it comes to the future of Nepal. And one issue is here that the vocational training is something that should be also taken into account when you look at the young people and their future. But that's something I'm a bit worried about also, and that's my observation. And when I look 10 to 15 years ahead, there is a big change in that respect.
Really interesting issues, Your Excellency, but we are coming to the end of the show. Do you have anything to share to our audience that I have left to ask you finally?
Thank you very much. Maybe I could use this opportunity to inform our esteemed audience that Finland is this year celebrating 100 years independence anniversary. So Finland is 100 years old as an independent country. And the main theme of this festive year is together. And even we are not able to physically celebrate this festive year with the Nepalese people, I would like to send a message to all Nepalese and ask them to celebrate this festive year in their hearts with us together.
Well, Your Excellency, thank you very much for your time. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Dear audience, time now to wrap up the show. Keep watching us. See you next week. Namaste.